Good morning and welcome to the webinar organized by Construction World and Infrastructure Today magazines from ASAP Info Global Group. I am the editor-in-chief and founder Pratap Padode. Today's topic for the webinar is Will PM Modi's economic package revive Indian businesses? Thank you for joining us and I hope you're safe from this deadly pandemic that has affected our lives today. Let me put on a presentation for you. So that's the topic. This is brought to you by Construction World, years in running, 23 years, distributed across 800 cities in India, largest circulated construction magazine, and Infrastructure Today, years in running, 16 years, premier infrastructure magazine, provides information on policy. ASAP Info Global Group also provides digital services, very critical during COVID times now. And you've got the contact mentioned out here for you to reach out to. Our set of publications that ASAP Info Global Group does, mainly in the construction, infrastructure, and engineering. And here is our esteemed panel. So we have Mr. Harshvardhan Neotia, Chairman, Ambuja Neotia Group, Mr. Madan Sabnavis, Chief Economist, CARE Ratings, Mr. Pradeep Singh, former advisor, infrastructure development, Government of Jammu and Kashmir, and former Vice Chairman, IDFC Projects, and Mr. Vinayak Chatterjee, Chairman, Feedback Infra. All of them well qualified, well experienced, and good speakers for the subject that we have at hand. Let's go back to where our economy is. The economy was already flailing earlier this year when the finance minister proposed the national infrastructure pipeline as a major infrastructure plan of rupees 102 trillion. But if you look at that just before this time, this has come from the economic survey, you will see that our sectors were flailing, whether it be agriculture, whether it be industry was desperately down, services slightly better, our GDP of course plunging down, our real growth also showing that besides government consumption, rest of it not as robust and needs attention. You can see again the sectoral shares here, and we can see in services there was some strength, which obviously we will come to that later how it has been hit, but it was holding up the rest of the numbers. We can see quarter-wise growth going downwards again. Look at the non-food bank credit. The black line out there, dotted line, is the MSMEs. The credit to MSMEs has just gone down, slithering down. Credit to large industries again going downwards. The only thing which is slightly up and about is the credit on personal loans, which again is another area of concern during these times. Exports, you have lower imports obviously because of the oil prices have benefited, and exports have also been down. This was the infrastructure investment in the last 6 years that we have been spending in financial year 2013, 5 trillion to up to 10 trillion in financial year 18. So that was what the swing was towards more infrastructure. And the future, the 102 trillion rupees national infrastructure pipeline showed what kind of allocation has been made to various sectors, energy taking the lion's share with roads, urban infrastructure, railways, etc. But look at the PMI index, which has really crashed, obviously, because there was no industrial activity after the middle of March. So at this stage, I would like to bring in Mr. Madan Sabnawis to just give us a sense of what the economic situation was during this time, just before the budget, when the economic survey was presented. Mr. Sabnawis?
Yeah, thanks. The Indian economy was sort of placed in a kind of a takeoff mode in 1920. That is, I'm talking of just at the time when the budget was presented. It was felt that economic growth would generally tend to be in the region of around 5% for 1920, but that would be a kind of a strong foundation on which higher growth could be built for 2021 and 21-22. So if you actually look at what the union budget had assumed for the 2021 budget, they had assumed that growth would actually move towards 7%. And it was felt that the problems which we had on account of GST was behind us, and that things would normalize in the next financial year. That is, I'm talking of 2021. And we had these usual assumptions of saying that we have a normal monsoon, there will be the usual rural demand coming in. That part of the story would play out. There would be some more private investment coming in. And some of the data which came from the RBI on capacity utilization had shown that there was a tendency for capacity utilization to actually improve until September. But however, we have seen that things have not quite played out according to what was expected. And even if I'm looking at 1920, on account of this lockdown we had for a single month, I think we have seen that things have turned dramatically in the downward direction. And as we are seeing on the screen out here, the PMI coming down to 25 or 27, what we have out here, it's clear indication that there is very negative sentiment which came about just because of that particular 1 week of shutdown. Now, just think of a situation in the month of April where there was a shutdown across all sectors of the economy. We could actually be looking and sorry, this is for the month of April, right? April, and even if I look at the month of May, where we have been closed down for most of the time, we don't really look at this improving significantly. We'll probably still be well below the 50 mark. We could be moving up from say 27 to 35 or 40, but that will still indicate that the confidence level overall is negative. In fact, you haven't put the services sector PMI, which actually came at nil, because I think most of the services are totally out of the running, which really means that if you go back to the earlier slides where you were looking at where the India's GDP came from, we are in this kind of a precarious situation where a number of the services, especially if you're looking at things like hotels, the trade, hotel, transport, storage, communications, with the exception of probably communications and a part of road transport, I think there'll be a very big negative growth coming from there. Real estate is something which has around share of 15% in GDP. That's going to have a major negative impact. So even though the banking and financial services have been very much on in the last 1.5 months or so, but we could be expecting a positive growth there to be overwhelmed by the large negative number. So we have a negative number also coming out there. And I think something which is pertinent for all of us in this discussion is when you're talking of the construction sector, which for 1920, we're talking of a positive growth number, which was projected in GVA for on the table, which we are able to see, is definitely going to move into a negative territory. So the entire real estate and construction sectors, they have been very deeply impacted, primarily also on account of the fact that we've had this large-scale labor migration which has taken place. And these are the sectors which typically require a lot of this migrant labor. And given the fact that the people who have gone have faced this traumatic situation and are very unlikely to return anytime soon, I think even when we are talking in terms of normalcy, there will be a pressure of labor. So for manufacturing, we would tend to believe that some bit of automation can probably replace the labor which has been lost. But where we require this unskilled labor in large numbers, and I think construction is one area, I think we will have a major challenge. So the way we are looking at India's GDP for 2021 is that on account of this pandemic and the way we see that things could be easing out, not before the second half of the year, we are looking at the best possible situation of a positive growth rate of around 1%. In fact, our revised number shows that the practical situation is that could actually get into the negative territory. So negative GDP growth looks very much likely, and will just be a few sectors like say agriculture, the government sector, telecom, FMCG. I think these are the segments, and drugs and pharmaceuticals. I think these are the 5-6 segments which could be registering positive growth rate. And if at all we do get a positive sense in our GDP, it will be more because of government spending. Now, just before I conclude, I'd like to say that this particular economic package of the government did not quite provide the kind of a stimulus which we were expecting. So earlier when we had this growth rate of 1%, we had expected there would be some additional spending coming from the government. But I think whatever we heard yesterday was, which I'm quite sure we're going to discuss with other panelists also, have been more on the supply side rather than the demand side. So therefore, we feel that a negative growth rate in GDP looks very much likely for 2021.
Right. Okay, I think let's also look at the corporate performance. What was for March 20, financial year March 20. I think you can see here that how India Incorporated has been indicated to be in trouble, and the projections ahead for 2021 seem to be drastically negative. But look at the, this is the performance of 1,837 companies. And you can see the third column, financial year 20 over financial year 19. You can see that there was a degrowth in net sales of by 3.4%, operating profit degrowth by again 3.1%, and net profit degrowth by 12.7%. So this has been the situation, despite the fact that there have been industries like housing, finance, shipping, sugar, NBFCs, retail, and private banks which recorded, in fact, double-digit growth during the Q3 FY20. But trucks, LCVs, telecom, electric equipment, all saw net losses. So now, before we move on, I think as the situation was there, I would like to bring in Mr. Vinayak Chatterjee to comment. During that time, we had just finished the economic survey. We had the economy at this kind of a situation, and the union budget was presented when the national infrastructure pipeline was laid out. What was your perception of how we were going to go ahead?
Thank you, Pratap. Let me actually take up your question and comment on the current situation rather than looking at the rearview window. I think in a classical stimulus package, the classical edifice is broadly that 70% is earmarked for a demand stimulus, about 20% is earmarked for a liquidity infusion, and about 10% comes for all the transition costs of reform, the monetary and financial costs. So you have a 70-20-10 pyramid, 70% demand creation, 20% liquidity infusion, 10% reform oriented. What we have actually seen is that the pyramid is inverted. We have practically, I would even be optimistic to say we have seen 10% of demand creation, 70% reform, and maybe 20% liquidity. So the expectation of the stimulus pyramid 70-20-10 has been inverted. So the first point where I would want to agree with Mr. Sabnavis is that the current set of announcements do very little for demand stimulation, which is very worrying, because without the demand stimulation, where will the multiplier effects come from? Where will the jobs come from? Where will the effort come from for bootstrapping the economy up by the bootstraps, or picking the economy up by the bootstraps? This is point number one. Point number two is that the National Infrastructure Plan of roughly 100 lakh crores, I know it's 111, but it keeps the arithmetic simple if you say 100 lakh crores, envisages not 20 lakh crores from the starting year, but about 16 lakh crores from the year one, where we are today. Your chart has shown that the last year we did 10 lakh crores. It seems a long haul now, with private sector completely out of making any investments, the states being fiscally very strapped. The burden is coming on the center to rise up to fund the infrastructure aspirations of the country. Now, doing 15 lakh crores by center is clearly out of the question. So many of us in the infrastructure sector must reconcile ourselves to the fact that even with the best of efforts in this year, with the kind of fiscal strain that we are seeing, if we are able to do about 7-8 lakh crores, we will be blessed. Which brings me to the second point, which is something I've been arguing for a long time in my business standard columns, that what I find unfortunate is much of the discourse is happening within the box of the Consolidated Fund of India, what is called the Union Budget. We constantly talk of 3%, 4%, 5% of the Consolidated Fund of India. In cathartic moments like this, which are very, very epochal and require out of the box thinking, I have been arguing that we have to have a twin engine running. You have to have the Consolidated Fund of India, which is the National Income Accounts, and you have to start a new fund called what I have named or the National Renewal Fund. And I have checked this out with a lot of policymakers and economists in Delhi. There is a lot of traction for the idea. The National Renewal Fund must complement the union budget's efforts in kickstarting the economy. So in my view, a clear back of the envelope calculation leads me to the conclusion that the size of the fiscal stimulus package should have been about 30 lakh crores. It should have been about 14% of GDP. 4% should have come from increased fiscal deficit from the union budget, and 10% should have come in two tranches from a new entity called the National Renewal Fund, which should be a historic 50-year fund, 60% based on government domestic borrowings and 40% from developmental finance, cheap developmental long-term finance abroad. Now, obviously there is a lot of details to these ideas, but I'd like to stop here to just summarize my view of the inverted pyramid, my view that a clear 30 lakh crores, 14%, and I have a breakup for that. So later, if you have time, I'll tell you why it's 30 lakh crores. And we need to have out of the box thinking, not just think within the traditional box of the Consolidated Fund of India, but one engine running there with a 4% expansion in fiscal deficit and a 50-year long-term fund called the National Renewal Fund, which will take care of the balance 10%. But let me stop here.
Okay, thanks, Vinayak. We will now just go to an audience poll and get a sense of what our audience is thinking. So there is it's a very simple one first to begin with, that pre-COVID, we're just establishing, was Indian business in good shape? So just three options. The panel on the screen will show you the three options. Just choose one, and we'll know in maybe in another 20 seconds what generally the the obvious answer is. So yeah, so we are already, it's a no-brainer that it wasn't, and we are possibly getting more than 60% people believe so. So yeah, so it wasn't. Yeah, I think so. We can. That's good enough. So yeah, so we've got a sense that 60% plus people feel that it wasn't in good shape. Or it's no 53%. Okay, that's 53%. Okay, then this was, of course, I don't want to get into the details of this because we already know about what the package has, which our finance minister has announced. I'm just keeping it just in case we want to refer to it. Like Vinayak mentioned, the calculations are that this is in terms of fiscal. This is just nearly 1.5% or roundabout there as in to GDP in terms of a fiscal benefit for the country. So there is another audience poll here. With COVID-19 crisis, how badly has your business been affected? There are four options here. Is it affected to the extent of 30%? Is it affected to the extent of 50% or 70% or 90%? So please again, just render your vote so that we know how badly businesses have been affected. Yeah, so we are getting in the votes for just 15-20 seconds more, and we will know the extent of this damage. Because there are multiple sectors being affected differently, and that's why it was important to get a sense of this. Okay. So 33, okay, 33% are saying it's 90% effect. Another 33% are saying 70% effect. Another 50% are saying 23% effect. So I would say, yeah, it's somewhere 60, maybe 60% kind of a damage seems to be for on average to the businesses. So this is the, the alarming situation that we are in. And I just wanted to bring this up because we need to know that is the response to such an alarming situation of the kind that the government has given. Okay, now finally one more poll, sorry, but this will then trigger off our discussion. This is the topic that will PM Modi's economic package revive Indian businesses? And you have 5 options. And the poll again opens up. It's a simple yes, no, maybe, or surely not in the short term, and there's no relief for Indian business, as whichever choice you would like to make. Once we have these, we will definitely know that what generally is the sense of the House. Just a few seconds more. Yeah. So I think really, yeah. So I think generally it is surely not in the short term. 52% people feel surely not in the short term. So obviously the Modi's economic package has not served any interest for the short term. Seems to be the answer. And going forward, let's go down to the discussion. So I'd like to now address Mr. Neotia. Have these announcements which the finance minister made, have they been able to address demand, liquidity, or social pain? What is your sense? Yes, Mr. Neotia. Have these announcements made by the finance minister during the Atmanirbhar Bharat package, have they addressed demand, liquidity, social pain? What have they been able to address?
Sorry, whom are you asking?
Yeah, please. Yes, Mr. Neotia. I'd like you to answer this. What has this package
Sorry,
been able to address in terms of? Have you?
So I'm sorry to disappoint.
Yeah, we can hear you. We can hear you.
Well, I'm sorry to disappoint. Yeah, I'm sorry to disappoint the panel, but actually I have more questions than answers. As Vinayak has very rightly and appropriately summarized the expectations, and he reflects by and large the views of most of industry that think that enough hasn't been done for demand stimulation, and perhaps the inverted pyramid that Vinayak talked about. So the big question to me is that it's obviously not possible that the government is not aware of all these situations, because there are n number of economists and there are so many webinars happening all over the place, and I'm sure many of the government officials are also attending them, and all inputs have been taken from various industry bodies. So it is quite evident that all these ideas have gone to them, and in spite of that they have chosen not to do it. So that leaves me with a question: what is it that we don't know? I mean, I'm certain that it can't be that they have just sort of missed it, because it is not something that they would not be aware of, and certainly they would be aware of what various economists and thinkers and business community are speaking. So if I have to make any kind of a guess, it could be that perhaps they are either going to do something like this, which they probably think they ought to do closer to the time when the markets open up, maybe after the worst of the pandemic is over. And many studies are saying that this will peak sometime in July. So maybe it is only going to be around August, September when we can see it ebbing. So is it that they are waiting for that kind of a period so that it is more targeted? I don't know the wisdom of the delay, but I'm just asking a question. The other is that they might have come to some internal calculation that says that the kind of stimulus that is required to really do this is probably just not affordable, and probably they don't have the bandwidth to do that. In which case, pretty much they are reconciling to the idea that let everyone find creative ways to manage the situation. Of course, it's not as though every patient that is left to fend for himself will necessarily perish. Sometimes internal immunity takes charge and you can survive. But it's probably not the best way to handle it, because whenever you get sick, you want someone, and particularly a specialist, to come and provide some succor and some help and remove the pain earlier than later. But there are people in the many parts of our country where healthcare hasn't reached, that finally learn how to deal with the problem and they are able to overcome it. So is it one of these? And I must confess my complete inability to shed light on what is it, because I don't know. But I'm asking this question to myself all the time, that what seem to be an obvious solutions that ought to have been provided to industry, if it didn't come after so many months of deliberation, clearly there is a reason. And I think it's important for all of us to really search for that reason, because we might then get either an idea that is coming later or some other thinking which we are missing for some reason.
Right. So I think I will take your question to Mr. Pradeep Singh, since he's worked in the bureaucracy as well. Mr.
And I
Singh,
have
what
all
is
the
what is
answers.
your assessment? What is your assessment of why such a such a package has been brought about, which doesn't really address the major concerns?
Well, I certainly don't have all the answers, Pratap. It's good to be back on a panel with Vinayak after a long, long time. And I am, of course, a bit surprised, I won't say pleasantly or unpleasantly, to find that for once, perhaps for the first time, I find myself at some variance with him. Maybe it's the incorrigible optimist in me, Pratap, but I feel that India is poised at another 1991 moment. Nothing like a good, solid crisis to mobilize us Indians. India broke out of many of its age-old shackles and the so-called Hindu growth rate in the face of the 1991 crisis. We are destined to break many more shackles this time. People are doing arithmetic and concluding unhappily that only 3.5 lakh crores or 4 lakh crores of the 20 lakh crores is the actual so-called cost to government. But the rest of it is actually our money. Forgive me for saying this, but this debate is spurious. Government money is our money too, the taxpayers' money, which has been budgeted for public purposes. When the government decides to give it to purpose X, it has to ultimately take it away from purpose Y, either today or tomorrow. So the question we should really be asking is, are these measures, and we should be asking these questions perhaps out of standardized filters and lenses. Are these measures going to have a positive impact? And if not, what can be done to improve that? I have some friends who say, and we heard this even here, oh, most of this is only liquidity. Liquidity is like blood in the body. You can have super healthy muscles, but if your blood stops flowing, you're dead. So when on the 27th of April, Monday morning, 3 days after the Franklin Templeton crisis, the RBI announced rupees 50,000 crores special liquidity facility to enable purchase of investment grade paper from mutual funds, it saved the debt markets from a meltdown. When the DISCOMs will receive rupees 90,000 crore loans against receivables, when the MSEs will receive 3,70,000 crores of collateral-free loans, subordinate debt, and equity injections, that will ensure that these engines of employment generation keep running. All that is real money, although just liquidity, although our money. The fact that all such steps do not involve an outgo of government funds is not bad news. It's actually very good news. It's a cause to celebrate because this safeguards the taxpayers' money for other uses and other purposes. That being said, there is no doubt, of course, that when the crisis is as huge as the one we are facing now, government spending also has to step in. Government also has to provide relief to those affected the most, as well as prime the pump, create demand. This need is pressing and the most visible today. To provide this, nearly 4 lakh crores have been provided in the form of additional allocations for NREGA, PM Garib Kalyan package, direct cash transfers, support to migrant workers, street vendors, small and marginal farmers. Is this amount enough? Of course not. 5 times this amount, maybe 10 times this amount may not be enough given the enormity of the challenge and the poverty in this country. It is also true that the amount provided is only 20% of the much wanted 20 lakh crores. I agree, but the fiscal room is just not there. Mr. Neotia seemed to be referring to this constraint of the government. If the government were to be irresponsible now and play to the gallery, they can easily borrow large amounts from the market, or even worse, print money in large quantities and distribute relief. But it will not be long before this comes back to hit the same very poor in the form of inflation and high interest rates, to come back and hit the same very growth aspiration by the high interest rates. So in that sense, I sympathize with the finance minister when she says that the government is not splurging and is being responsible. As for priming the pump, the most effective, quickest, and cheapest way of priming the pump will be to safely, steadily, and quickly reopen the economy. After all, why has the economy slumped? Because people, consumers, and producers are locked up in their homes. Demand is down because people have lost their jobs and because people are locked up. As the economy opens up, so will the demand. That's it.
Right. Mr. Singh, so you are sounding optimistic that the cautious way that the government has gone about holding back funds and releasing only extending a helping hand during these times is enough, and rest when the lockdown probably lifts, they might come up with more. But you know, the essential thing is that we needed unconditional help. The businesses need unconditional help, and the kind of conditions that everything comes up with. So for example, the 3 lakh crore which has been given for MSMEs for loans, again has a variety of conditions, although it's supposed to be collateral free and 1 year of moratorium. Somehow down the line, the implementation gets riddled with a lot of riders, and then it doesn't finally reach the deserving candidate in
The
business.
devil is certainly in the detail. The devil will be in the implementation. I agree with you.
And so amongst these interventions, now, for example, there was one other issue, you know, when companies are actually sliding down in terms of business because the demand has been hit, you want to extend them a loan and you want them to try to survive with a loan. That means they're going to be debt ridden. So that means when finally the business sees some light of the day, the debt has gone so high that the business becomes unviable. So, I mean, what is your take on that, Mr. Vinayak Chatterjee? I'd like you to which interventions, I mean, is an intervention of a loan package really helping a business, or is it actually taking, maybe for thriving businesses, but what about others?
It's a difficult question to answer. For businesses that will see a demand pickup, loan certainly helps. It gives the liquidity. For businesses that are anyway struggling to exist, a loan just adds to the burden. But I'd like to react to what Pradeep said. Since he's a very old and dear friend, I find it very heartening that he has not ceased to be an optimist. Therefore, it's nice to see that aspect of his personality intact. However, the point is that a problem requires a matching solution. If you say the patient is dying, but I am in a poor nursing home, I don't have the facilities, so at most I can give, some barley water or saline. Doesn't help the problem. You have to say the patient has to be transferred to a better and a bigger hospital to save its life. Merely being apologetic about being unable to provide the right sledgehammer solution, which the intensity of this problem deserves, that 400 million Indians are being pushed into destitution. The joblessness has crossed 25% joblessness in this country. 1 out of every 4 Indians is unemployed, and I personally think it's an underestimate. The size of the misery is humongous, and if we become apologists for the government and say that this size of misery, the pictures that we see, the destitution in Bharat, the destitution in urban India, 400 million people are being pushed out of our 1300 million, are being pushed into a life of severe destitution and uncertainty about the future, including tomorrow. The size of the problem is so humongous that to say that the finance minister must live by the conventional book and it is my money and your money and we must be conservative and do what is possible within the rectitude of an existing dhacha, which is what is the fiscal budget of India, does not match to the magnitude of the problem. Then you are denying the magnitude of the problem. If you deny the magnitude of the problem, I am with you that what has been done is very good. But if you absorb the sheer magnitude of what is going to hit us and remain with us for the next 3-4 years if nothing is done, the sheer scale of what is required does not match with the effort. And therefore, I am coming back to my point by saying this is a problem that is not normal. It is a historic, huge problem that deserves an out-of-the-box solution. I am not suggesting that we dilute the fiscal deficit by more than 4%. I am suggesting that we, like the New Deal that President Roosevelt did in the 1929 Depression, like the Marshall Plan that was after World War II in Europe, we need a size and scale to pull up this country so that we don't get into a black hole. And therefore, to think of an out-of-the-box approach, and I have given a suggestion. If others have a better suggestion, I would be delighted. I'm saying create a 50-year national renewal fund. And even in chats with the credit rating agencies, they have said that it is clear that 60% can come from borrowing money, but its repayment is over 50 years. 40% can come, if the Japanese can give 1 lakh crore at 0.5% for 60 years for the bullet train, surely institutions of that size and stature can contribute to the 10% of a national renewal fund, which should have a corpus of clearly about 22-23 lakh crores, 11% of GDP, 11% of 220 should be the size of the fund. It should be a separate accounting entity outside the Consolidated Fund of India, and that amount of funds should be used for demand stimulation so that jobs come back, livelihoods come back. The infusion of liquidity creates a maintenance. So if the economy is down at -2%, the infusion of liquidity will shall we say, keep that low level of continuum going. But that is a death knell. We have to raise -2 back to +7. How the hell do we do it without a massive stimulus package? And the alternative construct is a large 20 to 30 lakh crore national renewal fund, which then is extinguished over the next 40-50 years with a wind down scheme of 1 or 2% cess on direct and indirect taxes. We have to have a construct outside the box, outside the conventional thinking of the budget of India. That is my response. I'm not sure I've answered your question, but this was on top of my.
No, Vinayak, I think you're right. I think there are other sources of funds as well. Vivad Se Vishwas scheme, which is a tax amnesty scheme. We have 9 trillion rupees, 9 lakh crore stuck in tax disputes. I mean, at this time, if they can just fast forward it, at least they can settle something like 2 lakh crore, and that kind of money can be available on the table. We have government which owes. It is by the Minister of Roads and Transport, Mr. Gadkari, has stated that the government owes 5 lakh crore rupees to MSMEs. Now they are promising to return all this money within the next 45 days. Why were they holding this up for so long in any case? And so there is, just imagine, funds within the system which is just stuck for want of transaction movement or various other conventional methods which the government bureaucracy follows. So there is a lot of money available within. I would like to also look at some reforms which the government has been pushed to actually come out with. There's no, I mean, it's a wonder that at such a point in crisis, they're bringing out these reforms. They should have done that much longer back. Many of the reforms mentioned have been some which have actually been mentioned in passing in the past few months, but now they have come up with a whole set of reforms. Mr. Madan Sabnavis, what do you have to say? I mean, none of these reforms seem to actually indicate that they can help us in the short run, but do you still want to know your views?
No, I agree with you. I think this particular package, I think the first thing is that we all started off thinking that the economic relief package is a fiscal package. So actually, it's not a fiscal package. It's more of a policy package of the government. So as we were looking at the numbers, 8 lakh crores actually comes from the Reserve Bank of India. So 40% of the entire package came from the RBI. Then I think the financial institutions and banks are contributing a substantial amount in the form of liquidity. And I think we have all discussed this. I think the panelists have put very pertinent points that why should I borrow if there's no demand? So I think the SMEs giving them 3 lakh crores will obviously create a problem in terms of how do I repay it if it's not commensurate demand coming forward. And the rest of the package, to my mind, as you have mentioned, are more in terms of reforms, which are definitely required, but I think they only work over the medium to long term. So in fact, I think the version 3, 4, and 5, the third, fourth, and fifth tranches, we're actually talking of agri reforms, which we've been talking of, I think, for the last 15 years or so. So having them in place, and in case they do, there is traction, I think that will be very positive for us. And knowing this government, I think they do get things to move fast, so one can be hopeful that things will work out in the next couple of years. Things we have seen about power sector, or even say the aviation space, saying that airports. Now we all know that the airline industry today is in the dumps. There's hardly any possibility of a recovery in the next 6 to 9 months. So saying that we'll have more PPPs coming in, I don't think anybody will be interested in an industry which is probably on its last legs, so as to say it as of today. So I think the reforms package should not have been combined out here. But maybe the government chose that let's bring everything together. But that's created a bit of controversy since we start examining these things and saying that, look, this is not really adding to the current problem which we have, which is of course true. So in fact, I would have personally liked kind of a demand stimulus to come through. And I think the government has done everything keeping the budget largely unaffected. In the sense there's been nothing on the tax front, the GST front, income tax rates, corporate tax rates, something on that side where there's a revenue loss for the government could have been a kind of a stimulus for the economy. But probably in its wisdom, I think there's always, I also agree with Mr. Pradeep that if the government starts spending and said that the fiscal deficit is say 10% of GDP, we may be sitting in this discussion saying why they're spending so much. There's no right number as such, but probably I think that something could have been done on the fiscal side in terms of expenditure or taxes. But I think the government has tried to preserve that to a very large extent, given the fact that with the slowdown and the shutdown which has happened, their revenue has been seriously impacted already. So just remember the 4.2 lakh crores of additional borrowing is happening primarily because of sharp slippages in the revenue collections. If I have no production, no GST, no corporate tax collections, if corporate sector is making losses, I lose a job, no income tax collection. Trade falls, I don't get custom collections. Forget about disinvestment. We can't get 2 lakh crores, maybe 50,000 crores. So I think that calculation has already led to this 4.2 crores of additional borrowing. So in this situation, I think in their wisdom, they felt that let's look at the supply side. I agree in economics, you always need economic supply to be equal to demand. Here you've given all the incentives on the supply side, which will definitely help, but it's going to help in a very, very gradual manner. The requirement today might have been more on the demand side because people need to spend. Probably even people like you and I, we are definitely better off. I need to have the ability to spend, but if I'm not getting my regular salary, if I'm getting a wage cut or somebody's out of employment, we also don't have the spending power. It is a very complex situation. I admit it's not that easy as a policymaker because everything that you do or don't do can be condemned, can be criticized. But I think the government has done its best. Only thing is I would say that we should not think this is a panacea for a problem today, because I think the first point you mentioned out here, is it looking at social suffering? The answer is no. I would have liked it in case Package said very clearly that, look, the migrant laborers, I have this kind of policy to make sure you people can go home. I have a clear policy about how I'm going to open up the economy. That would have been pertinent. It would have meant no money at all, but it would have given a roadmap which all of us knew what's going to happen. Now, I'm working in a rating agency. I can work from home, but I'm not sure. 3 times I've already been told you have to go to work, but I can't go to work because of a restriction. Maybe if it doesn't affect me, it doesn't affect my company because we can work from home. But just think of the manufacturer, the shopkeeper, the retailer, he would like to have some clarity about when he can start his business. Maybe that thing that wouldn't have required money, but it would have provided a lot of clarity. Unfortunately, we have not done it. We can just hope that maybe the states or the union come up with it sometime. I think that would have eased a lot of social and physical pain.
Right. I'd like to ask Mr. Neotia, Mr. Neotia, public sector, I mean, it is mandated that the MSMEs, get the benefit of a 25% procurement slot, meaning public sector has to buy 25% of their procurement needs from MSMEs. That means public sector actually can really help revive MSMEs if they are growing. But somehow public sector divestment doesn't take place as at the pace that it ought to, and it's been years and years you've seen that. I mean, this is one of the suggestions that if we can privatize public sector units, and therefore we have seen that the values of those which have got privatized have really gone up. I mean, HDFC Bank today has probably bigger market cap than all the public sector banks put together. So this is one of the suggestions, but I'd like you to sort of come in now and tell us what interventions can help business companies survive in a crisis like this. What, in your opinion?
See, while we are talking about demand creation and we are talking about liquidity and all these other issues, there's one other issue which is rather unusual, which is hit this particular pandemic, and that is the fact that there is fear. And this fear of people venturing out and living their normal life is quite deeply embedded into people to such an extent that other than for absolutely essential reasons, most people do not want to actually venture out, certainly to do anything to deal with contact shopping or contact experiences, whether it is restaurants, cinema halls, shopping malls, etc. Now, how do we create demand when there is a fear factor? So I think while we have to address the liquidity and putting money in the hands of the people, if we are not going to get rid of the fear, people are just going to hunker in and sit at home. At least the consuming class. Now, there is the, as many speakers have said, there are many people who have to go to work just to earn a living. There are many of us who can have the luxury of sitting at home and doing our work without having to actually step out because we don't have to work with our hands. But there are people on the shop floor, there are people in the services industry who have to take the risk. Unfortunately, all of us, perhaps on this platform and many others, are people who are deciding consumption. Now, if we decide to reduce consumption, then the guy who goes out and takes the risk on the shop floor, he cannot provide the services or the goods. So even if you have the money, let's say theoretically, but if your demand falls because you don't want to actually go and consume, because you're hunkered in at home, then that is also a challenge. Now, this is a socio-medico challenge. It's not exactly an economic challenge, but this is about how do we deal with the fear associated with the pandemic. Not only is it important to open, but it is also important to allay this fear that we have to learn how to live with this for a pretty long time. Whatever be the estimates on vaccine, etc., and whatever I've attended few webinars and read probably a few 100 pages of notes on this, I don't see anything credible coming through before 18 to 24 months in terms of a vaccine. And in terms of even some medicine, which is all being experimented, it will still take 6, 8, 12 months, I don't know how long. Now, we can't have an economy which is completely hamstrung by this fear for such a long period of time. So while we open up, we need to know that we have to take precautions, and we need to know that we have to still go about our life. And this is really the challenge. How do we remain safe? And how do we also conduct ourselves, while of course fixing the stuff which has got damaged, which is the economic infrastructure, and repair that. The two together will only fix the demand problem. Otherwise, we will produce goods restaurants will open, hotels will open, but nobody will be there to go. Then they will close down again, because not because the government wants it to be under lockdown, but simply because there are no clients to go there. So this is what I wanted to say.
Yeah,
Right.
Pratap, can I butt in here? I think
Yeah.
this is really the key. This is really the key. Madan emphasized the issue of the need to open the economy, and Mr. Neotia is clearly drawing our attention to the what he calls the socio-medical interventions. And I think those are maybe not the traditional economist view of pump priming, but those are really what we need here. Because at the end of the day, however humongous and terrible and unexpected and shocking the developments seem to be, it's largely about almost about 2 months of a shutdown. And if we reverse that in a sustainable fashion, it's not that the demand has permanently disappeared or died. In fact, most of it is pent up. It's not that the productive capacities have disappeared or mothballed. Most of them are just lying idle. What we need to make sure is that the consumers and the producers can get back to producing and consuming. And once that happens, if there is sufficient liquidity, sufficient fund flow available, things should be all right. I mean, that's also at the same, and there's also no reason to expect that the government has nothing else left up its armor, in its armor. But at the same time, we also don't have to necessarily get overly pessimistic or exaggerate the problem. Of course, creative solutions, aspirational, large solutions like the ones Vinayak is mentioning, National Renewal Fund, will be terrific, will be more than welcome. But you know, it's not that we are at a point where we really need to take the kind of risks that some of us might want the government to take at this point. And the other thing which I wanted to highlight is that, like I said, you know, I think we're going to come out even stronger out of this crisis. My faith is resting largely on these reforms that they seem to be unleashing. Now, I know it seems surprising that at this point we are thinking of reforms. It seems like something in the long term. It seems like something that could have waited. But it's also true that most of these reforms are not new, that they have been talked about for quite a while. But I believe we are seeing a degree of convergence, a degree of focus and energy that hopefully will make a difference. I think it was Winston Churchill who said, "Never waste a good crisis." It's good to see that this government seems to be ready to use this crisis, this opportunity, to galvanize through reforms that under normal times may be politically very difficult to push through, and have been waiting in the wings for a very long time for that reason. That's the explanation for why they would come up with these things now. The agri reforms that I think you mentioned or somebody else mentioned have been talked about for 15, maybe more, 20 years, 25 years. These agri reforms that are seem to be already in the works now, they have the promise of revolutionizing the rural landscape of the country and removing so many distortions. The changes in the labor laws could actually benefit the labor more than the current laws could. The greater opening up of the defense, space, coal, social infrastructure, power distribution to the private sectors, and indeed limiting the public sector undertakings only to a few identified sectors. These should be music to the ears of the audience of this webinar. It's also heartening to see some promise of the revival of public-private partnerships that are so dear to Vinayak and me. The devil, of course, lies in the detail. I agree with you. You mentioned that early. There are many who are cynical about all these reforms, reform announcements. They feel that these announcements are merely to add bulk and give dignity to these announcements, that they are mere talk. I hope that's not true, because if that is true, then the government would have truly wasted this crisis. And I think one good way of trying to make sure that this doesn't happen, and one good way to assure the country of the government's seriousness of purpose, would be for the government to form steering committees, one steering committee for each of these reforms, and the steering committees to be overwhelmingly manned by top-notch professionals and experts drawn from across the country, private sector, hugely represented. Let that be called the steering committee. Let it preside over the implementation of each reform that has been promised with such flourish by the finance minister. Then we can say they're putting their money where their mouth is. Okay, you know, let people like Mr. Neotia, Vinayak Chatterjee, Madan, yourself, sit in on steering committees. These are not advisory committees. These are not consultations being held on the internet. These are steering committees. They will steer with the government for sure. The government will sit and chair, and then let them announce those as well. Yes, tapping the talent and also scrutiny, monitoring. Did you really mean it?
So,
did you really
but
mean
you know,
it?
coming back to the short term, again, I want to go over to Mr. Chatterjee, that accelerating infra projects is a no-brainer today. I mean, you know, Mr. Neotia mentioned we want to open up the economy. Mr. Sabnavis mentioned, Mr. Singh mentioned, but construction infrastructure projects are the easiest to actually get going, whether it's a metro project, whether we're doing the coastal road project, whether we are doing any plants, whether we are doing ports, whether we are doing airports, that whole national infrastructure pipeline plan. But for the fact that the funding now needs to be sort of reorganized from other sources, we should put that on full throttle, because if we did that, we have people who will get employment, daily wages, you know, the sense of security which Mr. Neotia mentioned, that fear which is replacing demand actually can start easing up. What do you think, Mr. Chatterjee? Why are we you know, stepping back on infra or going so slow on it when actually this is the time to really step it up?
I'm going to repeat one statistic and then I'll lay off statistics. The CMI latest report says 26% unemployment. And believe me, when the next report comes out, which will talk about unemployment in the month of April or May, probably May, you may see the figure creep up to 33%. What does 33% unemployment in a nation of our size mean? Have you thought deeply about the social implications, the inequity, the class divide, and all associated problems? And superimposed on that is the fear thing that Harsh very beautifully put center stage, the medical social thing of fear. And I'm saying, just look at the issue, the staggering issue of 1 out of every 3 Indians unemployed. The only real solution, and the no-brainer as you call it, is at this point of time to announce, fund, and ably manage, as Pradeep has said, through steering committees with the best of professionals, and immediately announce very large public works programs beyond the traditional road and rail. Power generation में तो कुछ होना ही है, so the only available public works programs are the well-known programs of NHDP and railway electrification and tracking. But beyond that, you need a slew of public works programs at the doorstep in Bharat, in rural India, in hinterland India, to absorb this body of unemployed men and women, give them income and create assets for the country. So coastal economic zones, river linking, major and minor irrigation works, rural roads, Jal Se Jal program, 19 crore households as per the PM's own announcement from the ramparts of the Red Fort on 15th August. 19 crore households to get tap water. Put armies of people to deliver it, you know. I mean, every state will require it. So you have armies of people sitting in villages with the right coordination and management and steering, as Pradeep has said, to remove fear, as Harsh has said, and what Madan has said about creating the demand stimulus. I would say the need of the hour is an announcement and proper management of massive public works programs across the country. And I'm going back to my stuck record of saying that cannot be done by thinking about tinkering around with the percentage in the budget, 1.5%, 2%. You have to create a national renewal fund, and no credit rating agency is going to mind that when you use that productively for creating national assets. This is what is required, and this would be my strongest advocacy.
Right. Okay, let's go to one more audience poll meanwhile, that we can get to know from whatever has been announced in the economic package, what amongst them seems to be of any interest at all, if any, to the people who are really affected. So audience, please, as a business, what is your most critical need currently? So there is a loan without collateral, which is one of the offerings that have come, loan with very low interest. Now, this is not their reimbursement of salaries and wages payable to staff and workers earning below 20,000 per month for 3 to 6 months. That is, we've just added as an option. And return of money to be received from the government taxes, refunds, PSUs, which Mr. Gadkari says is really 5 lakh crore. Is that, or availability of labor, which is again causing a lot of hiccups in restarting businesses. So which is your most current need currently? Which of these 5 options? Please vote, and we will know in a short while what people really want in the short run. Just 10 seconds more. Yeah, we're nearly there. Okay, the results are in. 27% say availability of labor.
Wow.
22% say return of money to be received from government taxes, refunds, PSUs. And 21% says wages payable to employees earning below 20,000 per month. Loan without collateral is the least of interest, and loan with very low interest is the second least. So you have availability of labor. That means people are actually rearing to go back to work, and that, like Mr. Neotia and others have all mentioned, that seems to be the most critical need. I think in terms of reforms, I want to see, is there any pressing reform which has come about which can actually grant that kind of acceleration to the economy now? Mr. Sabnavis, would you like to come in?
No, I don't think there is any reform which we should be talking of today, because I think the kind of a crisis situation we have, it has to be dealt with immediate measures which affect demand and supply. Supply to the extent that the government has done, I don't think I can ask for anything more. But I think it's quite interesting that the last poll which you have put, it actually says that this entire business of, I think what Mr. Vinay Chatterjee also spoke about, how this particular pyramid has been inverted. It actually doesn't really matter to enterprise, assuming our audience is basically coming from the work, from the enterprise. They don't think that credit and getting collateral free, lower interest is as important as the other factors. And I think the other factors which have been mentioned, like you're talking of the reimbursement of your salary or the availability of labor, they actually don't feature in your entire economic reforms package. So I think there is definitely a difference between the expectations of what enterprise wanted from the government and what really has been announced. And of course, there are limitations that government does things more at a macro level. So I assume they have looked at it more from the macro level. But specifically, I don't think, Pratap, I would be talking of any kind of more reforms which are required. I think direct measures or something which would be of more pertinence today, because I think their problems need to be taken more at a micro level rather than at a macro level.
So we have some questions from the audience now, and I'd like to direct some questions at the panelists. So on real estate, and I'd like Mr. Neotia to take that. So people are saying that, is there need to remodel real estate to give it some more reshaping the whole modeling of real estate with this coming of this crisis?
Well, this is a question that has to be addressed for each company separately and each geography where they operate in. So I don't think there is one solution that would fit everywhere. But yes, a couple of things are inevitable. For the short run, we will have a problem with cash flow because the sales will not be as robust, and therefore there will be a mismatch between your expenses and your income. And this is where I think one important point that I think most industry need is not necessarily an additional loan, but certainly a restructuring of the existing loans, because there is going to be a window of 1 year when you will not be able to service the interest and repayment obligations. So with a 1 year kind of moratorium and a reset should be permitted. Of course, the banks should be able to do it at their discretion, but they should be given the general mandate that this is something that they should look at on a case-to-case basis. They will, of course, have to assess the credibility and the underlying viability of the project. But in the short run, because of a shock situation, the cash flow will be very, very severely impacted for many industries, particularly hospitality and real estate. And therefore, if this reset is not permitted, they will all go into default, which would be a disaster because it is not inherently unviable once the business comes back on track. So this is one thing which is required. And I think generally on adjusting to the new real estate situation, it means we just have to become much more cost efficient. We need to, roll out our projects in a much more calibrated manner. People just sort of announce projects without having necessary resources to complete it and thinking that there will be an upswing, but that never happened. And that's why there was a lot of distress and a lot of built stock which could not be liquidated. And, that created its own set of problems. So I think we need to be much more careful while we are committing our projects. And then, of course, RERA has come in as a huge kind of a regulator, important regulator in the game. And I'm sure that many of the ills that were affecting the sector would get addressed by that. So that's my general answer to that question.
One more question as a follow-up is that what would builders, developers do with excess FAR which they already have? What could be possibly solutions on that if they're not going to be building it or there is not so much demand available now?
So they have to hold on because I don't think there is any short-term solution for the next 1 or 2 years, but I do feel that real estate will come back strong. Particularly housing will come back very strong because this lockdown has told us the importance of the home and the fact that you need some more space. Everyone will want a little more extra room for a lot of technology-based interaction with the outside world. So I think housing will come back fairly fast. Offices might take a little longer because we are now looking at the option of working from home. But I still do feel that offices will be okay. It may not be very hot. Retail should come back moment the fear of this pandemic is over. That is a very important aspect of human recreation and social interaction, which is fundamental to human existence. This pandemic has to be seen in the light of an intervention, an unfortunate intervention in the way we normally want to behave and live. So only for a short while, people are going to get impacted. Even now, when you see the limited lift up of the lockdown, you see the crowds on various parts of the cities. It's quite amazing. I mean, it's not as though people are necessarily out there because they have to do something. They're just out there because they just need that social interaction for their mental balance. So, which has been not there for quite some time. So I think that all will come back, but we have to think about a 1.5 year pause to anything that we are doing. And this is going to be a painful 1.5 years for the real estate sector.
Mr. Singh, what about the oil benefit that India has got? I mean, in terms of funds, we are blessed with the fact that the oil prices have hit all-time lows. So that benefit, doesn't that give us more muscle power in terms of bringing in some dynamic interventions?
Well, it should. I mean, it certainly helps our balance of payment situation or current account deficit. And as you know, fiscal deficit and current account deficit are really opposite sides of the same coin. And so it should also give us a bit more fiscal room. Even today, governments are being able to collect more revenues from oil products because the cost has gone up and they've been able to increase the taxes. So yes, it should certainly help. The other thing which comes to mind is that, as the government focuses on liquidity and fiscal and reform interventions and all, they should also similarly use this opportunity to do a lot of spring cleaning and housekeeping within, to revisit their own so many wasteful expenditures and so many inefficiencies. If they are looking for fiscal resources, which they should be looking for, it's not just about reallocating money from purpose Y to purpose X, but look at purposes which have outlived their utility or maybe never had any utility. Subsidies, for example, is a very sensitive topic, but I think it's a holy cow that we should touch. food subsidies, agriculture subsidies, fertilizer subsidy, for instance. Even after the reduction of the fertilizer subsidy this year, at 70,000 crores, this subsidy on a single commodity paid to fertilizer companies is higher than the national health budget. The subsidy is given to many other agricultural products, are distorting the markets and harming the environment and our land and our water resources. Many government departments and state undertakings are destroying taxpayers' money by being hugely inefficient and wasteful. Air India has been a mill around our necks for decades. You know, the numbers of bailouts they have been given and the amounts that they have consumed are legion. So some bold decisions are required there as well. And the COVID crisis can be turned into a positive memory on those. Those are again politically and, you know, all of those employees and so on and so forth, vested interests and lobbies, they're difficult to implement on normal times. Now is the time to look at those as well.
Yeah, Mr. Chatterjee, one question. Most of the infrastructure projects would be faced with force majeure clauses. What is that going to again sort of ground those projects? Or is there a clear mandate by the government on going ahead with this kind of crisis now?
I think the force majeure conditions are well recognized by the government, and one by one the measures are coming through. I certainly know that circulars have been issued that all infrastructure projects deadlines have to be immediately extended by 6 months, and then after a review, and various clauses and time frames for completion, etc., are being readdressed. Penalty clauses are being removed. So the government is conscious about the force majeure, and various ministries, depending on where the projects are anchored, are coming up with solutions. So to that extent, I see, shall I say, a reasonably practical and sensitive reaction from the government.
But you know, on that, Vinayak, some of the reactions, I think they're well-meaning, but I'm not sure they're fully thought through. I mean, for example, the 25% cut on the fixed capacity charge that the generators, power generators, have been asked to take. I just don't get it. I mean, if there has been, there is a force majeure, there is a cost of that. But the fixed capacity charge is the cost of capital and depreciation that the generators have to meet. Now, if they are being, first of all, either the consumer should bear it, right, or the government should bear it. The generator, which is the listed company, NTPC is a listed company, PGCIL, the transmitter, is a listed entity. They've been asked to take this cut and absorb it. Private sector companies, private generators, although they are not covered by this order, but I bet you the state governments and the central government is ultimately going to turn to them as well and say, look, you also have to take a cut in your capacity charge. What does that do? They lose their ability to repay their debts. And what does that do to the bank loans? And, you know, so it snowballs. So those are the kind of, I mean, force majeure is all very well. It is a force majeure situation by and large. I mean, you can look at the contract, but how you address it needs to be surgically defined.
Mr. Sabnawis, question for you. What? Okay, sorry, Vinayak, you want to answer, Mr. Singh?
No.
Okay, Mr. Sabnawis, on the mining, commercial mining, the various sharing of revenues, kind of a clause that is brought in. Do you see that a lot of interest coming into mining because of this? Now that you don't, the new clause allows.
Yeah, I think this will be more in the medium-term kind of a reform which should work out. And if I'm not mistaken, I think these kind of conversations, this kind of debate has also been there in the past. So this has just been packaged at a particular point of time. And if we do believe that this is a kind of a crisis situation where everybody gets up to it and these kind of reforms do take shape, I would tend to believe that this would work out in maybe next couple of years. But again, I would reiterate that this is not something which was required for fighting the pandemic, and we could have had more measures which address the very, very short-term issues. The medium and long-term, yes, they are required. It's good to package them, but I wouldn't harp on them too much.
Mr. Chatterjee, on subject of rural economy, see, so of course, there is another way of bringing up demand, which is through the rural economy, and the agri reforms which have been introduced, where the producer now can sell it to anyone else rather than the APMC. will that in the short run bring about some sort of a surge in revenues, in sort of developing the revenues for the farmers, for rural India?
I would like to believe it would. Listen, this dismantling this APMC business has been talked about for 3 decades. So the fact that it has finally happened is probably, as Pradeep has echoed, Winston Churchill saying, make the best use of a crisis. So, well, anyway, full marks for at least doing this, which has been pending. So a short answer to your question is yes, because having spoken to a few people who are involved in value-added horticulture, floriculture, agriculture, and various other cash crops, this sudden feeling of being let out of prison and being able to sell their produce to anybody, anywhere, has come as a very positive shot of adrenaline to the sector. So there is a lot of adrenaline, there is a lot of positive energy. So I think in the short term, there will certainly be economic benefits. But since Harsh has positioned the psychological dimensions centerpiece, I would also like to add that it has led to a huge degree of positive mental energy among the agricultural community.
Yes, Mr.
And
Sabnavas.
there are opportunities for private
Yeah.
sector.
No, in fact, I think again here I would rather downplay this particular move, because since I have been in the commodity markets earlier and do track them even today, I think we have not built the required logistical support. So it's one thing to say that a farmer did not go to the APMC, he can come straight away here to Mumbai and sell the products to me. But we need to make sure that the end-to-end solution is provided, which requires right from your warehousing, your packing, packaging, transportation, and access finally into the final point. Where I think lots of state laws are there which may not be permitting this kind of thing to happen. So I think this thing will work more in the medium term. I think quite a few states had opened up. It is happening to a limited extent. It does take place, but I think it's a very long road which has to be traveled.
Right. I think that brings us to the the end of this discussion. I think the panelists have very well put across the points. It's very clear that let me put it in a different way, that maybe the patient is in the ICU and we are offering Chyawanprash. I think that something like the reforms which are going to give you benefits over a longer period of time are being given as immediate medicine for reviving the patient. That doesn't work. I think it's very clear that we ought to infuse some fiscal benefits. I think our audience has given some direction in that light, and we will put up these proposals which have been discussed by our panelists and sent across to the government. We have done that twice in the past before, and few of the suggestions mentioned have found their place in this whole package. But I think the majority have been missed, and we look forward to the government being more proactive. And yeah, please go ahead.
Are there any questions from the audience?
No questions. We have addressed most of them. We have tried to consolidate majority of them. So people are asking what are the government subsidies for payment, debt. So basically they're looking at a direct benefit, unconditional direct benefit, which can land up in the bank account of the person, the business that is affected. Because for a good next 3 to 6 months, you're going to see a sharp decline. You've seen 60-70% of revenues absolutely down, and therefore to just take care of fixed costs and some variable costs, companies do not want to go to loans. They want to actually get some direct unconditional benefit, and that's what's required. So I think we conclude the webinar with this. I thank Mr. Neotia, Mr. Chatterjee, Mr. Sabnavas, and Mr. Singh for giving their valuable wisdom and time for this webinar. Thank you, audience. We've had a very good response, and we hope we can take this to making the government give us effective measures so that we can get back. And our next webinar on Thursday is on building safety and efficiency. So do sign in, and we'll see you there. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Pratap.
Thank you, everybody.
Thank you.
Thank you.